Welcome back to our channel. Here we have Christine again. If you watch our channel, you probably know that we already have her on our channel twice before talking about how to work with a gallery. She is the founder of the Beacon Gallery in Boston and also a certified art appraiser. Today, we're going to talk about how to value your art, how to price your art, how much you should charge, what is the fair market price or market value of your art. On the collector side, that is to maybe find out how to price a piece of antiquity or art. So that is today's subject.
Let me just jump in here for a second and talk about this idea of certifying art appraisers. And actually, you can be trained to be an appraiser, but there's no, as far as I've understood it, no real certification that you can take. So I'm not a certified appraiser. What you have is various levels that you can become within different societies. So for instance, I took like a 25-hour or 27-hour course through the International Society of Appraisers. You can see the thickness of the book. It took me many hours. This was during the pandemic. This was one of my pandemic projects. You have the International Society of Appraisers and the American Society of Appraisers, I think, as well. And when you're looking for an appraiser, you want to kind of go with one of those, someone who's been trained through those. And then there's an examination that you take called the USPAP, USPAP. They are offering training, but there's not like this kind of like badge that you're going to get out of that that's like, I'm certified, because there's no United States body that is certifying appraisers.
Well, thank you for the clarification, but I would still call it certified versus licensed because I mean, when you finish a course, you have an exam and you get a certification for the, right?
Yeah, this is just something that like they talk about how you actually are allowed to talk about yourself. That I just want to make it clear. And I've decided that like personally, this is not an aspect of my business that I'm like fully pursuing as something that like Beacon Gallery offers, but it has been so eye-opening and I've learned so much, and I'm really excited to be here today to share the knowledge that I gained and how I apply this knowledge to what I do on a day-to-day basis with everyone who's going to watch this.
Because majority of the viewers of this channel are artists. So let's talk about the artist side first. If you want to give a fair price of your art, should you just do it yourself, like through some sort of online apps, or should you rely on professional help? What is the best way to approach as an emerging artist who has no experience in pricing?
I don't think that you need to necessarily pay someone to get some help in figuring out how to price your art. I know that this is one of the hardest things to do for artists, is to figure out how to value one's work from the get-go. There are a variety of ways in which one can decide what is the value of one's art. One of the ways that an appraiser looks at the value of art that I think is useful when you're thinking about pricing your art is to think about what they call comps, which are comparables. So either you sold a piece before and that's going to be your own comp. So if someone has taken a piece of your artwork, and I'm going to use a little coaster here as like, this is your piece of artwork, we have this little map, and you sold this for, let's say, $100. And all of a sudden you say, okay, I have this piece of artwork, it's made of evidently cork. And this is worth $100 and it's, let's say, 3x3. Knowing that, you can kind of extrapolate your artwork and probably say, okay, so now I can take this one comp and say that something that is twice this size, if it's been made with similar materials, has taken a similar amount of time, and I think is of similar quality, should be probably, let's say, like double the price if it's double the size. Often people use the size comps. That's not always appropriate, particularly if it's something that's like incredibly detailed, has taken much more time, is of different quality. But that's something that you can do. If you have never sold anything, obviously that's not going to work for you. And so what you want to do is find an artist who's at a similar level to you, is in the same region as you, is making work that's similar. Look at what they're selling their work for. And that's a good place to start. And that can be what online is very useful for, like Etsy and other online marketplaces. to see kind of like what's out there in general for what your work or work that's similar to yours is being priced at.
But then there's a question that is, you see maybe a seller on Etsy, maybe on Saatchi Art, Art Finder. They have crazy prices, perhaps either crazy high or crazy low,
Sure.
but you don't really know how many pieces they have sold. Maybe they don't disclose this information. So you actually have no idea if this is the market price. Maybe they just price it super high to look good and they actually never sold anything, right? So if you're creating something either very unique with a very innovative methods, material, media, or if you don't find anyone in your region with a similar style, and in other regions maybe it's more inflation or more different currency, and it's not really comparable. Should artists use hourly rate? As I know some artists, they would say material plus hourly rate. Like I worked on it for X amount of
Sure.
time.
So there's no real wrong way to price your work. There's only ways that are going to sell your work and ways that will not sell your work because it will be too expensive. You, as the artist, can decide to do whatever you want and see what the outcome will be. I have had artists who insist on having ridiculously high prices for pieces, and I've told them that this will be an insurance comp because this is what they want to price their work at. Their work will be insured at this amount, but there's no way that someone is going to buy this piece for the 5-figure amount that they want to put it up at. They don't have any comps at this, but if that's what they want it up at and they absolutely insist on it, fine. I'm just not going to have a long argument with them at it. There are certain prices that people are willing to pay for art. That's for artists at a certain level. And then there are prices that they're not going to. And that's just the way the market is. That's when you may want to have a conversation with a professional. The professionals, people like me and other gallery owners, can offer a bit of a reality check on what is possible. And the problem is that you can spend, 100, 200, 500 hours making something that's this big and is absolutely exceptional. But until you have a certain level of stature within the art community, that people are not going to value it the same way that you, as the creator, value it. It's just not going to have that same worth to others as it does to you. And so it might be something that you just need to hold back on. Not everything has to be monetized right away. I did want to say kind of like about what you were talking about earlier, that there is this concept of fair market value. And fair market value is the price at which a property would change hands between a willing buyer and a willing seller, with neither of which being under any compulsion to buy or sell, and both having the reasonable knowledge of relevant facts. That is the key, is that everyone needs to have the information when you're making the sale. And neither, it's like that idea of you can sell a bottle of water for $100 in the desert if someone is going, if that's the only water there is. But that is not fair market value for that water because of the circumstances. And that's something that's really important to understand, like when you're talking about like pricing.
I think it's easier to know if you priced your art too high, because then, you will wait very long time, right?
People will react. They'll see your prices and they will react. They'll often react as well if you price it too low. Fascinatingly, they probably still won't buy it. So I've had people come in and be like, oh, these are really good prices, and then just walk by it. It doesn't mean people will buy it. That's why it's really important to price your work fairly.
Pricing it very low would give a bad image to the artist and art brand, and therefore,
There's no benefit to underpricing your work.
what if you could sell something at a certain price in your own circumstances? Let's say you're in a Asian country or a developing country, or you're in a small town and you used to sell the art very cheap, but you want to move to the international arena, selling your art online. And you might need to readjust all the global pricing, right?
I think that that's a bit different. So I think when I'm talking about your local, like what's happening when people are physically going into a local space. When you're talking about the international market, like let's take Saatchi for example. First of all, they're going to be taking a large percentage, and so you're going to have to take that into account. That's a site that's a platform for artists only. As a gallery, we're not really invited to be putting our work on there. You're going to want to take into account not only the, I want to say 30% that they're taking, but also any of the discounts that they're going to be offering, which would be another like up to 15-20%. So you want to be knowing that you're only going to think of it as almost working with a gallery. So you're only going to be getting potentially 50% of it. So you want to be essentially doubling already. Whatever your local price is, if you've been selling a studio, even if it's a local market where your prices are relatively modest, you should be essentially doubling your price if it's going on to Saatchi. Already, that's going to be a reference point. You always need to be thinking of like whoever is going to be taking a piece of it, like you need to be taking that into account. And the one piece of advice I always give people is you need to think of also what you're going to be okay with coming home. When you sell this piece of work and someone gives you $50 for it, are you going to be disgusted with yourself? And if that's like that you only got $50 for it, then you cannot sell it for, let's say, $100. You have to have a higher price. And if that means that you are working with someone who's like, no, I'm only selling it for $100, then you kind of have to take that piece off the table then. And that might be something that you have to do. Or you have to say, okay, I'm going to swallow my pride and swallow how I feel about this and be willing to do this for $100, knowing you're only going to take 50 home. Or you have to come up with a new price, let's say like $300, where you're going to come home with 150 and you're going to be okay with that. A lot of times what I do is try to back plan, which is like what's the end result going to be and how do I get to an end result that's acceptable to me? And so how do I get there?
So in the end of the day, how much I would be getting after taxes, fees, commissions, shipping, whatnot.
Shipping should usually be on the client end, but if it's not, yes, do figure out like what are all the other little pieces and all the people who are going to be taking their part, and right, what are you going to get in the end? Because if you don't take that into account and you're like, yeah, this works for me, and at the end you're like you have like $7 or something like that, you're going to be like, well, that was not what I expected, right? Sometimes the headline number is one thing and what the bottom line number is something completely different.
When it comes to selling art online, every platform has a different policy. Like Art Finder, they would, in theory, I see it on their site, but maybe how they apply it is different. It says the return is included within the commission. So if you pay for the commission, then it's like 42%. Okay, a lot of percentage, but it's included if someone decides to return it. But Saatchi Art, if it is the fault of the artist without a very good description, then the artist would have to cover that. Then there are a lot of unexpected costs. So would you also recommend adding a bit of a margin in case of repairs, returns, or other kind of trouble?
Yes, I would say to do so, especially for the cost of, let's say, packing the art. I believe with Saatchi, the shipping is the responsibility of the client, but I believe that you have to crate it in a very particular way based on size, for instance, with Saatchi. And if you don't, then it's not going to be insured, or if there's a problem or if it breaks, then there's going to be issues. So I recall having a piece of artwork with just that issue and realizing that I was going to have to spend a fair amount of money that I had not included in the price of the artwork to crate the piece, and kind of kicking myself for not considering that. And so do think about the size of the work and how you're going to ship these things out if you're going to be selling online. The shipping is usually the thing that will trip people up and has tripped me up in the past.
Even working with a physical gallery, sending it to the galleries, to the art fairs, also there are costs.
Oh, I've had people apply for to have work in shows with me, and they've gotten in, and they say, "Oh, I can't send that to you. It's too big." I'm like, "Well, why?" So yes, moving art around is very complicated. So
Yeah.
always something to consider.
Although that is not a part of the value of your art, but is also a part of the price, right? So,
Right, but then when it comes to the cost of shipping it around, which in a way is part of its value, if it's super heavy, it gets very complicated.
so then the next step is to actually add value to the work to make it worthwhile shipping it around the world. So, how would you recommend an artist, especially young emerging artist, to add value? For example, should this artist use more expensive material like use gold, use silver, use diamond, something that is actually valuable? Just a crazy idea. How would you, let's say, produce less copies to make it more unique?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question. I think it is important. Use the materials that are going to best express yourself. I don't think that you should be choosing materials based on the their cost and their value. I think it's important though to be really original in what you're doing. I see a lot of derivative art, and that's not the type of art that's going to get you into a museum. And so if you're trying to get into a museum, do not create that type of art. If you want to be selling well, I think that one thing that I find and I see a lot of people doing is making very shiny art. And so that's it's something that you could do is try to make things that are shiny and glittery, and that appeals to people because of our brain's inherent love of water, evidently, on what I looked into is that we're constantly looking for shiny things. So I don't think that necessarily means that you need to be covering everything in gold, but there is that. I don't think that's necessarily going to make good art. That might make you art that sells. And that's the type of thing that I think you do need to see in person though. And but that's what you see at a lot of art fairs. Shiny, shiny, shiny art. I would also say that remember that you as the artist are going to be almost in all cases responsible for the cost of the materials up front. And so unless you have a lot of capital, it gets very expensive. And so for instance, working with a bronze artist, he is putting a lot of capital up front into the pieces that he's making. The cost of the materials there's a lot of sunk cost in those. And so his work tends to be some of the most expensive work that our gallery has shown because there's significant value just in the raw materials. If someone wanted to like melt down these sculptures that he had, there's just the bronze itself would be worth a lot. And then what he's done to this bronze is obviously very valuable and time consuming as well.
How about the additions? If this artist certifies that he would only use this mold once, or certain limited amount of copies, would it also normally entails a higher value?
I mean, think of like the Wu-Tang album that was like $1 million and that there was only like one copy, right? People love their bragging rights to things, and oh, that there's only one of these in the world, or this is one of like five. Although I think that you should make the comment about how many editions of something you need for it to be considered like a fine art print as well. I would usually limit any sort of print at like 50 max, and I think 20 is usually a better number. It also costs more money to make more of something. And if you're not sure that you're going to sell them out, then you're better off making fewer. If you take the instance of sneakers, for instance, or clothing drops, the best thing that you can possibly do is create more demand than supply for what you have and make it so that stuff sells out immediately and you have very small drops of many different things that you can do on a regular basis, more than having like huge editions of which they're always available. So you want to keep people kind of like hungry for more. That's going to work a lot better for people. And so I would suggest doing it that way. That's where social media can really be leveraged for people as well, where you're kind of either doing like a once a month drop, or quarterly, and you want to try to sell that stuff out by making people understand there's an urgency to getting it because you only have a few. If you don't get it now, it's not going to be available later.
As an individual artist, I guess it is harder because then you will actually need to first create that demand. As a young artist, you're not sure yet, right?
There are artists who have it. So I just pulled up first of all Mischief, MSCHF, which is a whole website that does this sort of thing. I'm putting this up here. This is like they have drops and they're just random. They do just this sort of thing and people just wait to find out like what the heck the next thing is that they're going to put on there that people can buy. And it's always like something ridiculous and and people are just like waiting for it and like almost always sells out. What you'll find though is that if you have enough Instagram followers, for instance, that you can hype this stuff up. And if you do small enough drops, like if you do it 10 prints or something and you do this, see what test the waters.
If I'm a very young artist just out of college, I've never sold with a gallery, I've never sold online, I'm coming to the art market for the first time, and the only reference I had probably would be my friends. What is the best rule of the thumb for such a young person to sell their first piece of art? How would you approach it?
Sure. What I would do is A, figure out where you're going to be selling it first. So you don't need to price your work until you figure out what your market is. Let's say that you are doing a library sale and you're usually not going to be selling it on your own, right? It's like, let's say it's you and another artist, young artist friend, and you're going to be in your local library with 20 other artists. What I would do if it was me, is I would talk to some of the artists who are in there who are probably more experienced and say, hey, I'm trying to figure out what I should price this at. I've really never sold any of my work before. Here are the pieces. What do you think? And say, I was thinking maybe, and I would say you need to give a number. Emerging artists are considered to be artists who sell between approximately $500 and $5,000. That does not mean that your work has to be $500. A lot of work sells for less. We are going to have pieces that are approximately 4 by 4 inches, so a little bit larger than this, that are called sweet heart singles, and they're like pictures of little hearts, candies with words written on them that we've specifically priced. This is for Valentine's Day at $65 in our galleries to make them like little gifts for Valentine's Day. Just to be clear that like art does not have to be priced at $500 and above, original art. And this is by an artist who sells larger pieces for like multiple thousands of dollars. So like your work does not necessarily have to be priced at $500, but that's like the range for emerging is like 500 to 5,000. And you might say, I'm thinking of pricing this around, and you choose a number like I would say try not to go below $100 if it's an original piece of artwork that's going to be in a in a sale at a library. Let's say you say, I'm thinking of putting it at like $185. Do you think that that's a appropriate price for this, let's say like some small canvas? Um, and that person might say, that seems right, or that seems a bit low for what you're going. I would suggest something else. Or if you know you're holding some huge thing and you say, I'm thinking of pricing this at, $10,000, but I've never sold anything before. What do you think? They might say, you've never sold anything before? I might I might maybe lower your price a little bit. People in the arts tend to be pretty opinionated. Not all of them are quite as opinionated as I am, but um, but there you go. Like I think that usually if you ask nicely, they'll give you their thoughts on pricing. And you can also go around and look. So usually when you go into such a sale that you're in, you'll be able to see the prices. If you go into a gallery, sometimes the prices will be listed. If not, you can usually ask for a checklist, and the checklist should have the prices listed. In high-end galleries, they're only going to discuss price with you if you look like a qualified buyer who's specifically interested in, let's say, a particular piece. I don't particularly care for that type of approach to things, but everybody does things that are, differently. So you're not going to change the way the world works. But when you can go in and if you don't see any of the prices listed, you can always ask for a checklist. Like, be bold and you'll have those references so that if you're making pieces that are like larger or smaller or whatever size that they are, target places that have work that's similar and go and kind of do a bit of scouting, and then that can be really useful as well. This stuff takes work. It's like, this is the problem with being an artist, is that people think that it's really just like sitting down and creating pieces. It's not. There's a whole business to being an artist that is behind it, that requires work and practice and communication and just talking to other people and exchanging information, and if you can, being generous as well, because sometimes eventually, once you have the experience, someone new is going to ask you the same questions.
What if an artist is using a certain kind of technique that is very laborious, time consuming, and it's not really possible to reduce the price to, let's say, match by the size because either the material or some other factors that goes in that could make your work impossible to sell cheap? How should this artist go about pricing? Because he would be, let's say, the most expensive in this library, or he would be in an art fair that he would charge seemingly overwhelming amount of money, but actually, if you look into it, it's, let's say, fair. How would this artist approach the balance?
So, two things. A lot of appraisers and other individuals think that valuing work by size is really not a wise approach, but it tends to be an easy approach where you take we'll use this guy again, the two dimensions times of a number, right? So you have, let's say, 3 by 3 by 1.5 by 2. And it's like $2 a square inch, and that's how you get your prices. That works at a certain size scale. It tends not to work very small, and it tends not to work very large, which is why it's not always a good approach. But it's something that some people who work at certain size scales can use, and it also can help people to raise their prices easily as you're going. And we can talk later if you want to about like how people raise their prices, and that's a whole other argument. I mean, particularly when inflation is running wild. Can art keep up with the cost of inflation, right? Let's think about something like a person who makes incredibly detailed miniatures. That is something that is so niche that it almost doesn't fit into the mainstream contemporary art world. It's something that that person is going to have to seek out their own market for it and become an expert in that market. And most likely, they're not only going to be a creator, but they're going to be a collector for those items as well. And they're going to know probably the people who work in that industry, the people in the museum world, if there's a museum world for that, because that's not going to be the curatorial world is going to be incredibly specific to that world. And that is going to be such a niche industry that they are going to have to know how to value their work based on materials, time, and come up with a completely different pricing model. Um, but also, I'm going to imagine that that type of work is going to often end up being the pieces that are sellable there are going to be often made probably to spec or be commissions. A lot of art is made and is not sellable though, and that's the thing, right? It's like you can make the most amazing stuff, and work on it your entire life, and it can be almost literally priceless work. And people, it'll almost be impossible to put a price on it because people won't even understand it sometimes. And these things might end up in a museum. And it might still be hard to put a price on it. If you have a Venn diagram of like the art world and the commercial world, it's like it's not a perfect circle, especially as people are kind of like pushing the bleeding edge of contemporary art. It's like, how do you take someone who puts a pile of candy in a corner as an art installation as a conceptual art, right? And say, how
Banana,
much is this worth? Right. Well, but that was
$150,000.
$100,000. Maurizio Cattelan for comedian when he stuck a banana to the wall at Art Basel in 2019, right? I think he charged people $100,000 for the certificate of authenticity, which gave them the right, because you're not getting the banana and you're not getting the duct tape, you're getting the directions on how to do it, which is just the right to be able to reproduce it, was worth $100,000, I want to say.
And it's not even an innovative process. It's not even a patent, I mean, if it's a very sophisticated process, it could be a patent, but it's not even. So
So there you go, right? It's about him. If you or I stuck a banana to the wall and we're like, that'll be $100,000 piece, people would say, take a hike. And so it's often not about the work, it's about the person behind it, which is why it's all about what else you've done, where you've been showing your CV.
valuing your art, it has a lot to do with the artist, the art brand, the experience, the circle, the recognition by new and old masters, collectors, gallerists.
It's growing, yeah, it's growing your audience, a lot of it, which is why the marketing piece is so important as well as you're trying to figure out how to value your work.
When you say the marketing piece, do you mean that you gave some pieces for free to collectors of big name? Because, I mean, I would understand the marketing piece like that because I've had friends, one of my good friend, artist, quite a successful artist in China. He told me the biggest regret he had it was once he was in the 798 artist district and there was this collector coming in. He didn't recognize him because he didn't know this guy particularly. And he didn't give a piece for free. That was his biggest regret because he said, if I give him this piece for free, then we'll make a connection. Then he would introduce me to his world of collectors and open many doors for me. And would you encourage this kind of acts?
I mean, you could. Certainly that wasn't like the first place my mind went, but I went to kind of, I would say, more traditional marketing in terms of like getting yourself into galleries, getting yourself into shows, being a strong presence on social media, um, working, kind of just working the traditional social media routes. But certainly if someone wanted to figure out how to make it so that so this is essentially on your CV, you're going to have a place where it says like collections. And if you want to be able to list some high-end places and want to do that by, let's say, donating work to high profile collectors and to institutions, that's not a bad route to go. The issue with that is that a lot of high profile collectors will not allow their names to be used. So thus you would have to hope that something would come out of such a connection, and which is not a promise. Like sometimes some people will just take these works and kind of move on. I know that I had an artist a couple years ago who had given a piece to a very well-known Hollywood artist before I was working with her, and she like loved the fact that she had it. And every time this person would tweet something, she'd be like, "Oh my God, this is the artist who has my piece. Look at this. This is it. This is her. This is her." But nothing more than that came out of it. It wasn't like other people were seeing it up at her house and were saying, "Who's that?" and "I want to work by her," or things like that. It just kind of was a dead end, unfortunately. So there's no promise that more will come out of that. So you always have to know that just like everything else you do in the art world, including being in a really big exhibition or being in a museum show, that may just like happen and then be over. right? You can't hope that this is going to be like your big break. There's no promise that anything is going to be your big break. That could just be it. Institutional donations, a lot of institutions will just refuse donations. So they have tons of people. Anytime someone passes away, I think museums get like that call where they say, my grandmother just passed away and she has a huge art collection. Do you want it? The museum's like, what do I do with this? Um, it has to be very targeted, and it usually has to be from someone that they know or that they want a piece from. And then usually there still has to be an acquisition rationale. So meaning that someone because these places have to take care of this piece forever or for as long as they want to. And then they may still decide to divest of it at a certain point, which means that they might take your piece and say, yeah, yeah, we love it, thanks, and then get rid of it in 3 years and sell it themselves. And you have to decide if you're okay with that. Or they may decide to like show it like next to the ladies' bathroom in the basement, and you have to decide like how you feel about that. And because once it's theirs, and they get to do what they want. Or never show it at all, and it's just in storage. So yes, that's like a little bit of the marketing could be that. Or you could be a guerrilla, and how about go into the museum and go and put your piece up on the wall and then say you've exhibited at MoMA or something like that because you put your piece up on the wall and it was there for all of 30 minutes before someone noticed.
I think someone hacked an art fair like that. They found a spare wall and they just hung some works. And also, one of the most avant-garde, important contemporary art history event in China was the Xinxin Association. Is a bunch of activist artists that basically hang outside of the equivalent of MoMA in China on the fence, and they made an exhibition there. Yeah, definitely.
There can be this, and this goes for any industry, not just artists, is that we can often as humans have like that victim mentality and be waiting for people to rescue us and waiting for people to do stuff for us. And one of the best things that you can do as an artist is decide to do stuff for yourself. Hang your work on the fence outside of the museum. Put an exhibition together, you and your friends, and find another artist who can help you and get some ideas on pricing, or just kind of go a little bit under what you might think the pieces might be worth, and then see. And if you sell out because they're all underpriced, you can, A, you'll make more work, right? B, selling out an exhibition is like the dream of every gallerist and every artist. No one is here making the rules for all this stuff. People might try to tell you that there are rules, but like that's the thing is that some of the biggest artists ever are the ones who have broken the rules. And so try to think outside the box a bit and see what you can do. And that can be some of the most fun and interesting things that are possible, might be the stuff that you think of that are not necessarily following what everyone else is doing.
But when you have already a pricing range, maybe you have slowly built out your career, and what to do when you feel like you're trapped within your price range? Because I think the trapped could be two senses. It could be that you've been selling too cheap and now you really want to grow exponentially, and as your social media expands, or maybe you got recognized by some other important art professionals in art world, and you go, now I want to, let's say, triple it, or even put it, another zero. It could also be that I don't want to put it the wrong way, let's say old timers that once sold a lot that fit in certain kind of niche, but this niche is dying. It could be you just sold one thing really expensive and you have high expectations, but now the economy is going down and you're like, you know what, now I want to go to the affordable art fair and then try to expand downward like rain air, everybody could fly. But then you're afraid to damage your reputation because you have sold high before. So either way is not easy. There are certain negative potential risks. How would you avoid them?
There's a lot there to talk about, and I feel like I want to make sure that I get both of them, and I'm probably going to forget. So you're going to have to go back to the second point if I forget what it is after the first one. So for the first one, usually artists know that they can't just up their prices by orders of magnitude. And if they can, what has happened is that someone else is selling their work and it's been a secondary sale at an auction. And once that has happened, then they absolutely can sell their work because they have the comps. So auctions are seen, those are the example of fair market value proving the price of their work, right? And that's why all those auctions people pay so much attention to. I have heard stories about, and this is, you know, stories are, I believe this is true, is that like gallerists will go and like buy their artist work so that it doesn't go unsold, so that it doesn't get bought in as they sell it, so that they kind of keep their sales record solid, for instance. And so like how much we can actually rely on those records, who knows? But when you hear that someone has just broken the record and they're selling works at like $1 million and things like that, you better believe that their gallery and that artist is adding that, like, let's say that extra zero at the end. But for an artist who just wishes to, let's say on their own, add add up their prices, I heard, so this is not my advice, this came from I think I need to credit the School of Museum of Fine Arts here in Boston. They suggested that if you're doing well and you're showing consistently, and particularly if you have a major museum show, that you should be upping your prices by 20% every 2 years or so. Whether that holds during a global pandemic and an economic recession with significant inflation, I'm not sure. I have not been encouraging the upping of prices to that extent at my gallery because I don't feel like people have the appetite for what is essentially a luxury good right now. So I've just been keeping prices flat and have not been encouraging my artists to up their prices in that direction. But the thing is that it's again the law of supply and demand. So if you cannot keep up the supply of your work because people want it, then you need to up your prices. It can't just be because you want to up your prices. It has to be because there's been some sort of pivotal event, like a museum show, or because there's such a high demand that you need to literally kind of like calm the market for your work. So that's what I would say on that. The other side of it is goes for like the older artists who have had kind of like the peak in their career. I would also say it's almost for anyone. It's like, can I discount my work? Right? That's the question. Like, am I allowed to put my work on sale? And I really go back and forth on that. So at our gallery, if people ask us for discounts, we do the customary 10% trade discount. And we have that wiggle room. We'll give it, but we don't advertise it. We're not putting out there like, this week only, Black Friday sale, 10% off, all works. I don't think that that is what is going to draw people in. And I don't think that it reflects on kind of like the ethos of the art world, but it could be that that's one of the ways to like flip the script on the art world. And if some place starts offering, deep discounts all the time, and a la Saatchi, right? Like that's kind of what Saatchi does. If you go there, Saatchi Art, almost every day they have like a code for at least 15% off whatever you're buying. And if you're not using that, that's on you. You also, if you're buying art there, can almost always just put in an offer. You do not have to be paying what the artist has put in there. And so again, beware if you're an artist there and, know that for anyone who's watching this who might be a collector as well, is that you can usually make the offer. So I feel like the prices tend to be so fungible that all needs to kind of stay behind the scenes. And that's usually how it's worked in the past. This tends to be such a kind of like opaque industry in general that they don't want to put out their discounts because it almost seems like crass or like you're at a department store or something like that. And we're trying to, again, stay in the high-end art world. And so you don't want it to end up falling to something below that. In terms of artists Can you lower your prices once they've been higher? I think that if you have to do that, then I guess yeah. I mean, it's complicated. The issues that you come into contact with are that if people have paid more for your work in the past and own your work, then technically the work is going to be less worth less. But the thing is that what people don't understand is that I would say that 95% of artwork is not going to go up in value, right? You're not going to find that all the work that you buy is going to accrue value over time. If I buy this piece of art from, Little Miss Artist, she's still making these. Why is someone going to come back and buy my piece from Little Miss Artist when she's still over here making new ones? They're going to go, no, I'm just going to buy a new one. Okay? And so my piece does not have as much value as the new ones until she's dead, right? And that's why art doesn't have as much value until the person is dead in my simple little world over here. But that's the whole key is that the artists are making new ones. It's really hard unless there's not a supply for you to sell your work on the secondary market. Okay? And so the work is not going to usually accrue in value for a very long time. The idea that people are buying work as an investment, it has to be a very long-term investment. And for it to get like a hit rate where that work is going to shoot up in value, it's like you have to be doing a lot of homework and have to be really paying a lot of attention, working with an art advisor. Um, and that's why people should be buying, I think, what they love and what they want to see on their walls instead of things that they might want to be putting in like a freehold in Switzerland or in Singapore, and hoping that one day is going to pay off when they can sell it.
Excellent advice. I think totally agree. Is you need to buy something you love and enjoy it when you're alive, and not hoping that your great grandchildren can sell it for like 100 times more. Because then it might never happen. The probabilities, the longer you wait, and yeah. So then, can I say that you would rather invest in an artist who smokes, drinks, and don't go to gym like ever?
Someone who's interested in base jumping and and motorcycle riding.
I mean,
Find this, find our James Dean for the art world or whatever.
you would want to invest in an artist who will have longevity, who would go somewhere, go far, right? Like the future shooting star. Also, if the star has already burned out, it's also in a way good because on the other hand, you could have the limited, very limited edition of what has been done because he's not making new ones.
That's why it's too cruel and too cynical. It just doesn't compute, frankly, for me. It just is, it's awful. Like, I mean, if you think about, if I can bring an example in, like Bob Thompson, who has an exhibition up at the Hammer, who was around in the 60s and into the early 70s when he passed away, I believe at the age of maybe 28, from gallbladder surgery complications. I don't believe it was from cancer. An absolute tragedy. Wonderful, wonderful artist. And that to me is an example of this precious, precious body of work that is such a shame that we don't have more of. Um, and he was really underappreciated in his time. He did have collectors, but the critical mass of our world was not able to appreciate him in his moment. And that's the issue, is that none of these artists end up being usually appreciated and found in time. And so the idea that it's like it's like trying to win the lottery or something. I would say that that's why I'm like, just buy what you love and leave it at that. And for artists out there, make what you love and just do the best you can. Just follow your passions.
What would you buy?
What would I buy?
Yeah.
I have always loved figurative work. And so I buy black and white photography and I buy figurative work by local artists to the Boston area and other usually American artists as well. People who are making a statement about our world. I've always been someone, our gallery works off of the principle of social impact work and trying to do good in the world as we're showing and exhibiting art. And people who are trying to make a statement with their work through what they're painting or creating in general is really what makes me feel passionate about the work. And if I had an unlimited amount of funds, I would go around and collect that, and my house would be full of it, and I'd probably have an entire storage unit, and I would have a husband who was saying, "You have to stop buying art." And I'd probably be starting my own museum.
What is the story of the art behind you? It's from your
Oh, when my
parents.
parents moved out of their house in the same town that I live in outside of Boston, um, we inherited like all of their artwork. And I don't say no to things that I think are, visually appealing enough. But I have very different taste in general. But these are little
Asian watercolor.
Asian. I actually think they're original. I don't think that they're prints. I don't know. Little watercolors or little tiny prints or little pictures of Asian scenes. And they go well with this room. They kind of give it like a calming feel. The art that I like tends to be very colorful and very energetic, so it's not always like bedroom appropriate. And this is a room that serves as both office and bedroom. So it's good for when we're trying to have people calm down. Well, I think that people think that everything they buy is an investment and everything they buy is going to go up in value. But you have to remember that you need a buyer. It's kind of like with a house. It's like, I mean, you might only need one, but you have to have someone who's going to buy it on the other end and has to be willing to buy it for more than you bought it for new. And so I hate to make like the new car like kind of allegory, but it's like the same sort of thing. It's not that the work is like used and it's worth less now because it's certainly not that, but it is that concept that like you have to find that person who thinks that there's a higher value to it. So it could be like that sports car though, that someone has to you have to find that person who thinks your, you know, 1986 Porsche is worth more than you paid for it in 1986 and loves the way you've taken care of it and thinks it's amazing and loves everything about it and is willing to pay what you want to ask for it, right? And usually the good thing is that you're not just going to ask for it on your own, you're going to be bringing it to the secondary sales market through an auction house, through a secondary art dealer. So there's galleries that work in this market specifically. Usually we're either primary market, meaning we're getting art directly from the artist, or they're secondary, and you're going to go through one of those, and they're going to help you price it. You're not going to try to do this on your own. But the thing is that they're going to take a percent as well. So you're not so if you think it's only gone up like 20% in value, then probably you're not going to make as much money back on it. So again, you have to think, why are you trying to sell it, right? If you need to get rid of it, great. But if you're just trying to kind of like test the market because you think it might be fun to make a little money off of it, chances are all those administrative fees are going to kind of cut into your profit.
I have actually a idea. I don't know if it does work or not. Is called artist buyback, because there's IKEA buyback. If you don't like a piece of furniture, you could always bring to IKEA and say, "I don't want it anymore," and they would act like a second-hand store and they would buy it back. If
IKEA is
I,
big.
yeah, but if I
Yeah.
were an artist, I'm gonna say I will give always an artist buy back, right? Like if you don't like my work anymore, you can always return it to me, and I will buy it back at a certain, of course, a certain discount because there's the gallery's cut and this cut. Like hey,
Oh my God.
oh my god.
I invite artists to comment on this portion of the program below and tell me, would you be willing to buy back your art? I would say that is going to be a NFW for most artists. I have, in very specific circumstances, I can think of like one I think offered to do that from someone who was unhappy with a commission, I want to say, um, like a year after the fact for very specific reason. But it was, I feel like the it's very complicated to try to do something like that. It would be like that's like LL Bean. It's like you're gonna bring your like used toggle or whatever, and you're gonna be like, I used this thing 10,000 times, and now I don't want it anymore. Will you take it back? But not even will you take it back. Will you give me money for this? Will you give me money, collector, back for it? You know, if anyone wants me to give me like free paintings back, I will always take like free work. Beacon Gallery, send me your free art. I'm not gonna give you any money for it, but I always have praise place for people's free art that they don't want anymore. But I'm not buying anything back. Not even if I sold it. No,
Oh
no.
my God, I had such a terrible idea. But I always couldn't get my head around when people say, oh, like I invested in this really good jacket. And I was like, do you live off your looks? If not, why would you call this investment? Like when people say they invest in something, I automatically think they are professional in making leverage of this thing. Like when they buy a house and flip the house, then it's an investment. Otherwise, it's a liability, right? Or it's an asset. I would not call something
I think they're trying to
investment.
make themselves feel better for
So maybe that's a good thing to say, hey, buy art, it's an investment, right? Then you feel better.
Yeah, well, so again, it always could be. I think back to, let's say, the jacket, or I think the question is, do you want to buy 10 jackets 10 different years, or do you want to buy one jacket that you can wear for 10 years that costs, let's say, 9 times the price?
So yeah, timelessness piece versus fast fashion. You want something that lasts
Yes,
long.
but also even not even the fashion piece of it, it's the quality. So I have like this, I bought a pair of boots the first year that I came back. I was living in Singapore, right? And I'm like, oh my God, my feet are going to freeze off here in the Northeast. I need a pair of boots. And I remember the guy being like, these boots will last you 3 years. And I'm like, watch how long these boots will last me. And here I am, like going on year 7. And of course, I just have the same pair of boots. I just don't wear boots that much. But I was also like, I'm going to buy like a good solid pair of boots. I'm not going to buy like a garbage pair of boots. And I'm just going to wear them to, I'm the person who like wears everything to death. And so I just buy nice stuff. And yeah, that and let's say the same thing goes for art. Buy the stuff that you want to see on your wall day after day. Um, but also know that you can move it around. It's kind of like fashion. You'll have your seasons where you wear the coat and you wear the boots. Buy those timeless things, but know that you don't have to put it on the wall and leave it there for 30 years. The issue that people have right now is that kind of like sense of commitment, I find, with art. So they're willing to make a commitment for the same amount of, for the same price with the items that feel usable, with the, you know, the $5,000, let's say, couch. Um, but knowing that they're going to have to get rid of it in 10 years because it's going to be old, because their, you know, dog is scratched up or their child has vomited on it 25 times and it has like a million crumbs on it, or they don't like it anymore, right? And or they've redone their living room, right? But they will not spend that $5,000 on, let's say they have another $5,000 of disposable income after that. They don't want to commit it, though, to a piece of artwork because they don't feel like they can get rid of the art. It's like that sense of like, well, but what am I going to do with this? Because art isn't disposable the way a lot of other things in our lives are. It's like I'm not going to put it out on the curb with a free sign on it.
That's why you should have artist buyback.
So we go back to your artist buyback program. So how much would they be willing to take? $500? $50? Free. Give it to me. That $5,000 piece. Once you're tired of it and you don't know what to do with it and it's sitting in your closet, send it to Christine O'Donnell, care of Beacon Gallery, 524B Harrison Ave, Boston, Massachusetts. I'm waiting for your packages, large or small.
That is small. Yeah, I never thought about the, what am I going to do with it after? I never thought about this. And I think it's more like people should think more about this when they have a kid or a cat or a dog, because a lot of people don't think about what to do with it after 18 years. They just have like, abandoned cats in the streets. So if they can do it to the animals, why couldn't do
They
it
can
to the art?
You can set your cat free in the street, set your art free in the street too. Set your art free.
There should be a municipal, like city hall should have programs. Like they have it for the fridge. You just call a certain number.
Your art recycling.
Yeah.
Let's set this all up. We have a whole new business model next week. Art
Yeah.
recycling.
I'm sure that no matter, how out of fashion the piece of art is, there is residual value.
Oh yeah. I mean, for the most part, there can be some pretty bad art out there. I mean, there used to be like a museum of bad art around here, which I always wanted to visit and didn't get to. And then there's like bad art that has ironic value as well. People want like bad art on their walls just because it's funny. There's always value to almost any piece of artwork. So I feel like this interview's gotten a little off track, but that's okay. It's certainly fun.
Yeah, certainly fun. Well, that's exactly. Maybe people don't have so much, value out of this video. At least we had fun, right?
I hope they got some value out of it.
Before finishing, I just want to give a big shout out to our Patreon, to the artists and art lovers in our community. Thank you very much for your support. Every second month, we will upload a video on a different subject. Make sure you hit the subscription button below not to miss the upcoming videos. That's all for today. See you in the next video.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.